alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a guest that I don't know how long, actually. I've been wanting to have guests of this caliber on the podcast. Welcome to the show, Malorie Cooper.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
Well, it's great to have you. I think I've heard you on a bunch of podcasts. You do make the circuit of the writer podcast quite often.
I do, yeah.
You have certainly, you've appeared on my favorite, the Dead Robot Society, a couple times as well. And that's not even a particularly prominent one for a lot of folks. Anyway, good show, though. I do give those guys a shout out. I just had Terry Mixon on the podcast last week, so, you know. Anyway, enough about that. So, Malorie, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you write.
Sure. Well, my name's Malorie Cooper, and I write under the pen name M.D. Cooper. And I have published now something like 95 books, and 90 of them are all in this one universe called Aeon 14. I think about 24 series in that universe, and they all follow, most of them follow a single group of characters across their adventures, but there are a number of spin-off series as well that follow different timelines and kind of tie a bigger story together.
Wow, now that's an epic achievement, let me just say. Huge scale. Obviously, you've got this, and it's a space opera, correct? Or military sci-fi? Which one do you call that?
It's kind of all the things. I refer to it as a future history.
Okay. Interesting. Alternate future history, is that what you said? Or
well, not alternate, because it might be the real one. You never know.
For sure, yeah. I guess I was just talked over you, so repeat that for a second.
Sorry, what?
What did you call it again? Because I missed the part of it.
I just referred to it as a future history.
Future history. Okay, great. I thought part got cut off, but apparently not. Awkward me. Oh well. The listeners are used to this kind of thing now. So, so thanks for your patience, listeners. Okay, so Aeon 14, enormous series and several series, whatever, enormous universe at this point. Yeah. So. How fast did you write this series? How long have you been publishing these?
Between 2012 and 2016, I released 4 books, and then since the beginning of 2017 and now, I've released about 91, I think, books.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. You see, that's just kind of what changed there in 2017 that allowed you to do that.
Well, or
in 2016, I guess.
The big thing that happened in the latter half of 2016 is my wife and I, Jill, figured out how to advertise well on Facebook, and got my first book out system in front of a lot of people, and it really took off. And I realized at that point I released my 4th book in November of 2016, and had a $25,000 month,
wow,
which was pretty awesome. And I prior to that, like in June, I was making $300 a month. So it was a pretty neat jump. And I realized that this was I was at the crest of a wave, but if I didn't keep working, that wave was going to pass me by. So I decided to quit my job and become a full-time writer, with 3 months of solid sales under my belt.
Oh, that's gutsy.
Nice. Well, I figured like it was now or never. Like I'd wanted to be a full-time author for my entire life. Well, since I was 10 years old, at least. And I'm like, it's right in front of me here. And if I don't seize it, it's going to be gone. So I did it. I went for it. And I thought I thought maybe I'll write 4 or 5 books a year. And that's what I thought I could do. But in 2017, I banged out like 22 books, I think, or something like that. In 2018, I did 44.
I think I'm going to make use of the show's explicit tag and just quote our early Ermi from Full Metal Jacket and say, "Holy dog shit!" But no, that's amazing. That's so many books, obviously. And we're talking. Though actually, I want it just for perspective. What's the average length of these books, page wise, word count wise, whatever?
They probably average around 75, 80K.
Okay, so these are big books by the standards of indie publishing.
Yeah. I mean,
pretty big.
there are some as long as 130, and there are some as short as 30. I kind of consider
but mostly around that range.
Yeah, they average around 75. I did about 6 or 7 months ago. I worked it all out, and 77 I think was the average.
Okay, healthy length novels, actually quite similar to another very swift author, very fast writing author, Michael Anderle, who we've had on the show before. Similar length too, actually, which is kind of interesting. But so what? So you just kind of went and you were able to churn out all these books, because really that's kind of my obsession, is spending more time writing, writing more effectively, more books, getting more books out.
I've always been the sort of person who kind of throws myself entirely into whatever I'm doing. And on top of that, my wife, Jill, is really good at sort of taking care of a lot of things around me while I'm fully in the zone like that. So we sort of made an agreement. We said, like, okay, in 2017 and 2018, I'm just going to write my pants off to try and build up a backlist, so that because everybody we talk to has always been saying, like, this is feast or famine, the writing gig. And I like more consistency in my life than that. So we decided that the best thing to do was put together a really big backlist. So I worked really hard. I worked like 16-hour days for months on end at some points, just butt in the chair all day. I would wake up and start writing as I drank my first cup of coffee, and I would fall asleep in the chair.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty hardcore, and I don't recommend anyone do that, but it's sort of a personality trait of mine that I will work that hard at something that I'm getting into, and then try and figure out a life balance after the fact. Although I've kind of gotten there now. I actually have a pretty decent life balance. I had days back in 2018 where I was doing 14,000 words a day. Now I've settled into like between 4,000 and 6,000 words a day, which is a much healthier word count for me.
And still very fast by many author standards. I mean, a lot of like traditional authors, they write, they would consider 3,000 words a day fast if you were doing it regularly.
I just don't think they're working very hard then.
Well, I mean, I remember the people who do 3,000 words a day without fail, never miss a day kind of thing. It does add up, but it's true that that's some of the hardest working authors in the industry, in the traditional industry, that I remember. When I remember paying attention to that stuff, at least that's how fast they were working.
I shouldn't besmirch anyone, but it does. Like, I'm not a very fast writer by per hour standards. For me, like, a good hour is 1,000 words an hour. But if you think about it, I mean, I see a lot of authors who can easily hit 1,000 words an hour. You said you can do 1,000 words an hour. That's only 3 hours of work a day then.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I do like 6,000 words an hour now that I'm dictating.
Right, yeah.
So it adds up fast. It's the problem I've had lately that I was telling you a bit about this before the show is I built up this kind of anxiety increasing procrastination cycle around writing for a long time, and I'm recently trying to get rid of it because that just is useless. Why do I have that?
Yeah. I think the thing that I think is really important for getting any kind of work done is to figure out what you're doing that's making a molehill into a mountain. Because that's what happens with almost any task of any significance. Pardon me, is that you think about the whole thing. It's called, like, you're trying to boil the ocean. Well, you can't boil the ocean. You can't write a novel in one day. You have to create bite-sized chunks of work and then tackle that bite-sized chunk of work and get the win. Getting the win is really important.
Yeah.
I did, and if you need to set an achievable goal too, so you can feel that victory. So if for you an achievable goal is 1,000 words a day, set that goal and meet it and meet it and meet it, and then say, you know what, I'm going to try and up that now to 1,500 words a day. And it's like, it's that whole thing, like Rome wasn't built in a day, all those kinds of sayings are all there to remind us that these things take time, and we need to, you build the Colosseum one day, and you build something else the next day. You don't build the whole thing at once.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I definitely breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. I'm having a hard time deciding what's bite-sized for me, though, in particular, because I just recently started dictating, and I'm like, okay, so I can do 12,000 words in a day with ease now. That's 2 hours of work of intense work. But I mean, that was super sloppy, mind you. I published the book that did that. I'm like, oh yeah, better revise that again. So luckily, indie author magic went back and fixed it again, cleaned it up more. But and now people seem to be enjoying it. But the point is, like, 5,000 or 6,000 words an hour. times what? How many hours is realistic to do in a day now is what I'm trying to say, because getting the story in, like, how much story do I have in me a day is really the thing I need to ask now.
Yeah.
How much can I rely on? That's a ton of story.
That's what I found for me is why that's actually the main reason why I found that I only have about 5,000 or 6,000 words in me. And part of the thing for me too is now that I'm 90 books in with a lot of the same characters, I can't just write the same things over and over again. Yeah. I can't write like Tannis in a corridor having a shootout with people XYZ again, because I've written that 30 times. So I've had to slow down because I'm thinking like I've got to actually come up with new situations and new scenarios, and I've got to up the ante. But I've also got to make it so it's not just like a bigger, badder bad guy all the time. I need to be creative and clever and stuff like that. So that's part of what slowed me down as well. I'm trying to write a better story, but I organize my work just by chunks of time. Mm-hmm. I'm going to work for 20 minutes, take a 10-minute break, work for 20 minutes, take a 10-minute break, work for 20 minutes, take a 10-minute break. And that way, because then rather than trying to figure out how much story do I need to write, I use this thing that is very easy to manage, which is time. I write in chunks of time versus chunks of story.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I like that. I've tried that too, because then I'm not saying I'm writing a chapter this half hour or whatever, because that to me was too granular almost. It's like, then I have to get the chapter done. But if I don't get the chapter done, but I get the chapter done in 20 minutes, it's different from getting the chapter done in 30 minutes, and it gets stupid. As opposed to if I'm just writing for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however long. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good, that rings true to me. I think that would work for me as well. Yeah. I think for a lot of people, myself included, the issue of being kind of rigid in your thinking about the story, you said, like you were saying, you got to write a better story. You can't just repeat the things. You can't regurgitate what you've already done, or in your case, or you can't just write the same thing that everyone else has written. I mean, in some cases, that's the goal. People are writing to market very strictly. Sometimes they want to do something like that. But even those people, they want to put their own spin on things. They want it to be different in their own way. And so there's a limitation on how much, it's how many little decisions and tweaks you can make. Yeah. I mean, people talk about decision fatigue all the time. And I feel like that's the issue I've been running into as an author, sometimes as a writer, is I have to make 500 kind of consequential decisions each day. Yeah, I'm discovering the book as I go. Yeah. And that's just to write 10,000 words, which that's a lot of words, but so if I have to decide every sentence. So there's this thing I've thought about. I'm not the expert here, obviously, but I've thought about trying to zoom out, like kind of take a longer view, so that so that those sentence turns aren't the thing I'm getting hung up on. The paragraphs aren't what I'm getting hung up on. It's just like I have this goal for kind of this section, maybe. But I don't even define how long the section is, because that just increases the irritation, like having a chapter break, Yeah. And I'm just trying to make it as kind of fun as possible, because that's always been my motivation behind writing. Yeah. That's the strongest motivation I have to write anyway. I mean, money would be nice, but I can have fun just writing. And what do you think about that?
I think that's the number one thing, to be honest. Like and somehow for whatever reason, I've never read a book on writing. I've never taken a writing class or anything like that. I don't know what beats are. I know what a story arc is, and what a 5-act and a 3-act play and so on is, because I took that in high school some 25 years ago. Dear God, but I didn't want to get hung up by that. And a lot of people talk about this stuff, and like, I don't want to get hung up by the mechanics of telling a story. I'm telling a story about things that people are doing. And I mean, I intuitively understand things like you got to have the rising action. You have to have, inciting incidents and stuff like that. I know the fancy words for them, but I was writing this stuff long before I knew the fancy words for it, because I simply just read a lot of books. Like in my grade 12 high school year, I read 400 books. In 1 year.
So you don't do things halfway, is what you're saying.
I really don't. No, when I do a thing, I do a thing all the way. And so I learned story just by reading so many great stories. And I understood things like I intuitively understand, like, okay, if I introduce a scene, I need to give a certain amount of setting right away, but not too much setting, because I don't want to make the first page of every single scene like a description of the room and everybody's hair colors and stuff like that. To the point where I actually don't describe. I have main characters. who appear in multiple books for whom there is no physical description of these people whatsoever. And I probably have hundreds of characters like that appear frequently and have no physical descriptions. Some of my major characters, like I've got this guy named Yusuf. Yusuf's been in like 13, 14 books. We know he likes to wear a Speedo when he goes to the beach, but we have no idea what his hair color is, and so I don't spend a lot of time on those sorts of things. I spend most of my time on the interpersonal relationships between the characters, because those are actually kind of easy. Once you have people in your head that are saying things and doing things and whatnot, it becomes really easy to have them interact with one another. And what I find is once I let the characters just start interacting with each other and John with each other, they just grab the scene and go from there. So what I usually try to do is get my characters at the beginning of a scene just yapping at each other, and they just pick it up and run with it from there. And then it's just like, okay, where are they going to go?
Yes. Yeah, dialogue can really flow nicely, right? It adds some kind of it kind of naturally adds a drive to the scene, because the characters are directly telling each other, not telling each other, but they're talking to each other and communicating stuff that they want, basically. Or what they don't want, whatever, as the case may be. But and it's kind of funny. You said, you never read a book on writing. I was an English major in college. I studied a lot of writing stuff. I've listened to countless podcasts about writing. I've read a fair number of books about it too. But I think most of that was pretty much not that useful. Not as useful as just having read a bunch of books and watched TV shows and stuff even. Yeah. And the average diet of a writing book is somebody's opinion on what they've already done. And they're almost all like memoirs in that way. Yeah. Which is okay, but only if you're in it for a memoir or like a commentary.
Yeah. And I feel like reading that, especially that sort of stuff, would be like trying to learn how to play football by listening to football commentators.
It is a lot like that, yes.
Because no, that's not how you learn how to play football. The way you learn how to play football is you go play with other football players.
Yeah, it sounds painful, but it's the way you would do it. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
If you wanted to do that, that's how you do it.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't listen to the guys, commentating on Monday Night Football to learn how to actually play the game, because it's very different down on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, and they may have been fine, players. It's a very direct analogy here. A lot of those people used to play the game, but they aren't explaining how they did it or how the players currently are doing it. They're just talking about what it looks like from above, which makes sense.
They're not talking about when you twist your foot this way and you see that guy drop his shoulder, you have to instinctively know to do X, Y, Z or something like that. That's not the sort of thing they commentate on.
Right. That'd actually be really cool. And that's the kind of thing I got from. I'm not a huge sports fan, but that's the thing I got from the Scott Sigler sci-fi football one. I forget the series. Those books. The Rookie was the first book. That's the only one I read.
Okay.
But it was these guys playing American football with aliens on each team. It's very funny. Cool. In space. They travel around in space playing football with aliens in different positions on the teams. But that's the kind of thing. Like the way he would describe those games put me more in touch with football than I ever been, because I wasn't a fan. Right. I don't know why I read it now, but it was fun. Cool. Anyway, that can be like my book recommendation for the podcast today, because it was a pretty good one.
Cool.
And there's a whole bunch of them now.
Unique too.
It is. It's also kind of funny because of because the concept's so silly. But if you ask me, it's kind of silly anyway. Far Future playing basically the same sport, but they're non-humans. It's like, okay. Yeah. That's awesome, and also kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
Anyway, so but back to the writing with more kind of speed and enthusiasm, and focusing on the characters is definitely a great way to do it. Are there any other tricks you use to get to the bottom of that? Not to get to the bottom, but to get into the well more easily, that kind of thing.
Well, there's some things that I do. I pay a lot of attention to people, and part of that is because I'm on the high functioning end of the autism spectrum, which means that I grew up not understanding how to interact with people, so I just studied people a lot instead, because that's what really autistic people do, is they just try to mimic what society does until eventually you get really good at it. I also feel to a certain degree that everybody does that, to a certain extent, but that was sort of I feel like because I did that, I've sort of analyzed a lot of how often people speak from the heart, and how often they're just trying to say things to make everybody else around them feel good, and how we like to make each other laugh, and all sorts of things like that. and how we're sometimes sarcastic, and certain people use sarcasm all the time as their way to convey their state of mind to people and stuff like that. So I always make sure that my characters are always they're always joking with each other. They're always needling each other. They're trying to make each other laugh. There's gallows humor and stuff like that, because I feel like that's how people really behave. If you get a bunch of people together in a room, in a crowd, they're playing off of each other constantly. And so I do that. And one of the ways I find myself doing that the best with characters is I sit them down for a meal. And I have a bunch of characters who are going to be on a starship together, are going to be in a team together. I have them grab chow. They're talking about what food they like, what food they don't like, who's going to do the dishes. Why do we always have to have our peas done like this? Well, it's because this person likes them. And I find that all those sorts of character traits that make people come out in meals. And sometimes I'll just, if I'm trying to explore the things a little bit, I don't do it too much because I hate wasting words that I'm not going to be able to publish. But I'll take the villain too, and I'll throw them at the table as well with the main character and just have them all interact with each other. And once I do that, and because I spend so much time knowing my setting, I feel like that's really important. I feel if you don't know your setting, then you really flounder. Then you are truly just making it up as you go along. And I find that's where you see a lot of mistakes that authors make, where you're like, gee, if this is how your setting works, then back here in chapter 3, they should have done X, Y, Z, and the whole book would never have happened. Because they didn't quite at that point understand their setting well enough. But because I've spent so much time with my setting, and I spent 2 years establishing it all before I started writing, once I know these characters, I can put them in the setting and I know exactly what they'll do, because for me, it's a fully fleshed out world that they're operating in.
Oh, what's funny is that sounds so similar to how I do things, but maybe it makes sense because not the dinner table thing. That's awesome. I never considered that. I love those kinds of scenes. The meal scenes, yeah, because for exactly the reasons you were pointing out. But I never really thought about it in those terms before. But one of the other things that's funny is that I'm also on the autistic spectrum, pretty high level again. But it's weird that, and I have a similar approach to settings, so there's a lot in common there between the two of us, anyway. But that's what weird coincidence. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah, that's neat. But you think meal thing, movies and TV do it all the time too. They always they'll set people down for a meal because it forces everybody to sit there talking with each other for 15, 20 minutes.
Classic one, the first episode of Firefly.
Yeah, that's and they use the dinner table fantastically in that series.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not always just a meal. Sometimes other stuff happens there that's more dramatic even than just people dialogue. Even
Joss Whedon uses that particular tactic all the time. Like in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they were always sitting around the table in the library studying.
Yeah, good point.
Always trying to get people down sitting at a table face to face as much as possible.
It's kind of the old stage play stuff, because I know Whedon is a big fan of the theater. I'm pretty sure, because he's directed movies based on like Shakespeare and stuff.
Yeah,
on the side, obviously, not his big stuff. But anyway, that makes perfect sense there too. I just think it's fascinating how just getting the story down is so much easier when it's obvious what happens next, that kind of thing. And when the characters are speaking to you, when you know the world, these are the core things. And I absolutely couldn't agree more. Honestly, that's enlightening, because it's just getting a different kind of perspective on a process that's actually very similar to mine.
Cool. That's neat.
Yeah, it's weird, and I don't know how useful this will be to other writers who are listening, but whatever. This show is too brief to really dive into anything too deeply. So whatever. I think it's mostly for entertainment, folks. So if you are entertained by listening to this,
I think there might be a couple of tidbits in there people might be able to take away.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. You were quite enlightening there, I would say. Good examples too. So I guess we're running a little low on time now. So have you been reading anything lately? Have you got any books you'd recommend, or shows even?
I'm actually, people are always horrified when I say this. I haven't read a book in 4 years.
Too busy writing.
With the exception of my co-authored books. So some people say count. So
fair enough.
I do have those. But the main reason why is actually I don't want to taint my voice, because whenever I read stuff, I pick up the voice of the person I read quite a bit, and it shows my writing. So I have to be very careful not to taint my voice. And I also I don't want anyone to think I'm stealing ideas. I want to make everything as fresh as I possibly can. So I'm not reading for those. but I do consume a lot of media, a lot of TV and movies and stuff like that. And what have Jill and I been watching lately that we really like? Well, I really enjoyed season 1 of Westworld.
Ooh,
That was fantastic. And season 2 is a little bit darker, and I'm curious to see where they're going to go with it. But the whole idea is basically the rise of AI and how we treat AI, which is something I've always been quite interested in. There's also more nudity in that show than I've ever seen in my entire life.
Wow, even more than Game of Thrones, or did you not watch that?
Well, because
season 1 of Game of Thrones was extremely. Oh, you mean because the robots? Yeah, because they're going to like the shop or whatever.
By people, and they're all naked all the time. So
okay.
You will see more male and female full frontal nudity. You'll see like 60 to 100 naked bodies in every episode.
Wow, that's interesting. I guess that's probably helpful for artists who want to study anatomy.
Yeah, well, to be honest, in some respects, it was kind of neat just to see people not treating bodies like they were these sacrosanct things, but just say like these are just bodies. Everybody's got one. Here they are. So it was
fascinating.
It was pretty neat that way. So I found that to be really quite interesting. And another thing I'm watching that I sort of just did on a lark, because I'm generally not an anti-hero kind of person. I like my heroes to be like paragons, and all squeaky clean and whatnot. But it's the Harley Quinn animated series. It's on DC Universe. And it's in many respects, it kind of parallels the Suicide Squad and the Emancipation of Harley Quinn thing that they've done in the movies recently. But it's Harley Quinn breaks up with the Joker. But this one actually like deals with her personal relationship with him a lot more, and about how she like rebounds back to the Joker. And she has roommates with Poison Ivy, and Poison Ivy is like super sardonic and sarcastic and stuff like that. And she has to form her own crew. And it's just hilarious, some of the stuff they do in that show. They did a really good job like walking through the character of Harley Quinn, like actually like becoming much more introspective about herself and her life and what she's done and how she has to improve it. And I was really quite surprised. They actually had like touching moments and everything in it.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
good. Yeah.
It swears. They
I haven't
swear
seen either of those. So.
Like there's so much swearing in that. I wish I could show it to my daughter, but they drop the C word. I mean, it rhymes with grunt.
Wow. It's that one.
Oh, they actually
certain other podcasters drop all the time too, but there you go.
Yeah,
those shall not be named.
But yeah, that's some of the stuff I've been doing lately. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds good. That sounds really fun. Let me see what I've actually, because I didn't read 400 books in my senior year of high school. Let me just put it that way. I'm still catching up on the reading in a lot of cases here. And so I'm reading a bunch of these top-selling fantasy novels, because I'm writing epic fantasy mostly right now.
Cool.
And the one of them is what's the one I got the furthest into? It's where's the Kindle? I cannot remember the name, but it was #1 on Amazon in epic fantasy for a while there, and I think the Kindle is over there. Yes, perfect. Give me a second. So basically, this book is really it's like I said, #1 in epic fantasy, but it seemed more post-apocalyptic, like sci-fi actually. When I turned A Girl from Nowhere by James Maxwell.
Okay, I've heard that.
Yeah, it's pretty good so far. It surprised me with how plain the language is, and it does use a lot of fantasy tropes. Mm-hmm. But it's clearly like they talk about Earth as it's like nobody believes in the Earth. It's like this distant future, and they're on some other planet. They've crashed. The people are all called settlers, so we can kind of get an idea of what happened. But these people crashed here and forgot everything, and they don't have any technology. They're just scavengers and stuff. And they're monsters and aliens and things that they ride around on and whatever. But it's pretty good so far. I've read about 20% of it. So I just say you're going to see that one if you go to Epic Fantasy right now, because it's just been ranking. It was just on pre-order. I think it just came out on May 1st, which is the couple days before the show goes live. It's the day we're recording.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So but it had some really interesting kind of features. It reminds me a little of Cameron Hurley's work, and also like I said, of Mad Max, like Fury Road kind of thing,
right?
But without vehicles, with monsters instead of vehicles.
That's
but they're not like giant monsters. Now it makes me think I want to do a book like that though. It'd be cool. Anyway, kaijus instead of war rigs.
I just watched Aquaman, where everybody's riding around on giant monsters at the end. So yeah, that works.
Or giant sea crocodiles or whatever.
Yeah. I love the fact too that basically like it's it's an enjoyable movie, but it's so by the numbers at this point. Like
Yeah.
like the most of the comic book movies are just like, wow, like, okay, is there gonna? I kept like wondering where the sky beam was gonna be at the end, because like there's
Oh
always like, a
gosh, the Sky Beam.
Yeah, it's like we gotta have a sky
Luckily,
beam.
they left that one to the Little Mermaid. And they
Yeah,
didn't do that
exactly.
in Aquaman, from what I understand. But and actually, it's funny because I've heard Aquaman described as it's like it is the structure of the movie is kind of like your friend who doesn't remember the whole story, trying to tell you about how they did something normal. Because it's like they're introducing new stuff. Like, oh yeah, I forgot about these guys. They're here. Don't worry about them. Let's go on. It's like here's the sea goblins. Let's fight them.
It's true. Yeah, it is
And
sort of like not it's linear, but at the same time, it's not linear. It's kind of interesting in that way.
it's like in a slightly less charitable take would be is I've also heard is the one where it's it's like this is what is it? It's like Black Panther, but for stupid people. Which is not. I'm not saying that people who like Aquaman are stupid, but it's a funny. I thought that was pretty funny. It's like it's representation. It's like, okay, so mainly because the guy in Aquaman himself isn't the brightest bulb. He's not clever. But anyway, yeah.
No,
there you go.
He can take a hit really well, and that's what you want in your Aquaman.
He is tough, and he is a Chad. So there you go.
Exactly.
In that version, for sure.
Harley Quinn. In the Harley Quinn cartoon, she kicks Aquaman's ass. So there is that.
Oh boy! Now you're taking me back. Now you're taking me back, because that reminds me of what was it? There's these great YouTube series. There's 3 videos. They're heavy metal music videos, and they're all animated by the same guy, but they all use music from the cartoon Metalocalypse.
Okay.
But they're all Batman music. It's the Bat Metal music videos. So if you like death metal specifically, check those out, folks, because they're silly. And the second one involves sea creatures, so that's why it came to mind.
Oh, there you go.
Including Aquaman. The Batman and his team have to go rescue Aquaman from Ariel, from the Little Mermaid, and a bunch of other sea creatures. And it's the most gruesome thing you'll see in cartoons, probably. At least this side of an animated version of Watchmen, probably.
Actually, this Harley Quinn cartoon is like pretty nasty. So you might. It's they got King Shark like eating children and stuff like that. It's insane.
Okay, that sounds like something I'd be into, especially after I watched Gotham a while ago, and I liked Gotham quite a bit too. So I could get into that. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, we're out of time. Thanks for being on the show, Mal.
It was great.
Oh, thanks. It's been fun for me as well. And tell people where they can find your work and where they should look for your site and stuff.
Sure. Well, they can go to aeon14.com. That's AEON 14.com. All of my books are listed there. All the links to my books are in audio are there. Or you can just go onto Amazon and search for MD Cooper, and you will find all of the books. However, if you want to know the best reading order and stuff like that, you can go to Facebook and search for the Aeon 14 fan group, and there's like posts there about the best reading order and where to start, and the fans are always willing to help too with whatever sort of story you might be interested in reading to start out in the universe.
Oh, pro tips. Yeah, that's going to be important with 90 some books and probably more all the time.
There's more work being done to try and figure out how to get people to start in the right place than almost anything else right now.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a problem I hope to have in the future. Hopefully not too far in the future.
There you go.
Life goals. All right, folks. Thanks for listening, everybody. You can find me at mentalcellarpublications.com or timniederwriter.com, but obviously we got one because nobody can spell the other. My last name is a maze. And then you can find my books on Amazon.com. I've got 3 big ones out there and a couple smaller ones. And yes, Shadow Prince should be out in June. I'm saying it now. Put the Shadow Prince, the sequel to Demon Scroll, my second epic fantasy novel in this series, should be out in June. This time it's that or I push it back again, but I'm not going to do it.
I'll keep it on track. Don't worry.
Well, now that I got Malorie on my, I'm gonna be whipped into shape. Let's put it that way. Oh boy, yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you next week.
That tears it.